to the Ghosts of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 85 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we'll be discussing chapter 11 of A Clash of Kings. That's Theon 1. Another new POV character.
Another?
Who's spoiling us.
Wow. It's like a whole new book or something.
Mm-hmm.
This should be called The Clash of New POVs, maybe. Anyway, we're going to chat about the chapter, and we're going to try not to spoil any future plot points for you, and hopefully we're going to provide you some entertainment while we do all that.
We will summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some reader communications. Be sure to check out the show notes. They'll provide you some additional information that will be particularly helpful if you're not reading along.
Indeed.
Mackelly, how are you?
I am doing well. How about you?
Not too bad. I have a couple of slightly exciting people. Well, just one slightly. I have a appointment for a vaccine.
All right. Good job.
Yeah. I have to go to the zip code which has the highest rate of COVID infection in North Carolina in order to get this. So I feel like this whole vaccine is like a very, very bad 2-act video game where the first act is just a matter of solving puzzles that rely on just pure luck and perseverance, and the second act is sort of like a very mild zombie game where you have to sort of riddle through the infected to get to the vaccine.
Oh man, well that's good. Yes, I got my shot yesterday. In fact,
I
beat
you're
you
so much
to
younger
it.
than me. How is this happening? That's not right.
I'm
in a much more vulnerable demographic.
It's usually age before beauty, but in this case, it went the other way around, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
Yes. Did you see?
So, which one did you get?
I got Pfizer. But did you see the email we got this morning that our place of business is becoming a vaccine center? So we probably could have just stayed put.
I could have told you that. I mean, I spent hours and hours trying to get a hold of this vaccine, and then immediately, the next day, my company said, "Yep, we got it."
Yeah, exactly.
Just come on in.
I had to drive an hour each way to get my shot. Turns out,
mine is actually closer than work. So.
Oh, okay. Well, there's that. So. There you go.
But I don't know what I'm getting, and I'm slightly scared of the place I'm going to.
Okay.
They feel a little bit of a mar and par operation. I'm not sure what I'm going to get.
They made it themselves in the back.
Exactly.
Pull it out of one of those old 1950 refrigerators.
Yeah.
Ethan got an internship today. He was sitting at this very desk because he was afraid that being at his apartment, his roommates might be making noise and stuff. So he drove home and did his interview right here in this very seat, and they offered him the position on the spot at the end of the interview.
Wow!
So very exciting.
What's he going to be doing?
He's going to be working for Volvo.
Oh, heard of them?
Yeah, time or two. So exciting stuff, very exciting. He came. Yeah. I was working upstairs, obviously, and he came bursting up the stairs. I thought it was either going to be good news or terrible news. By the way, he was thundering up the stairs. He was going to be like, "I blew it," or "I got it."
I drove within 50 yards of your house today.
You did?
I had to get my passport. So I went up to the post office.
Oh.
The big post office up at Westgate. And
okay.
I went past
you should have stopped by. I could have given you that mic.
I almost did.
And the game, the murder mystery game I still have for you.
I did think about it. All right. Well, this is quite a long one, so let's get down to business. Although he's a new character, where was Theon when we last heard about him? Last we saw him, he was at Riverrun with Robb and Kat. They were debating the merits of sending Theon to Pike to entreat with his father to join the Stark cause. So, Mackelly, why don't we give him the summary of this one?
Okay. Theon beholds Pike for the first time since he was carted away to Winterfell. The castle of Pyke sits atop a promontory that juts into the sea on the south side of the island of Pyke. Erosion has left a series of stone islets on which part of the castle remains, connected by narrow bridges. He sees his father's flags flying above the towers of the castle, but unfortunately he's too far away to make out their kraken sigil. The captain of his ship is nervous about their close approach to the dangerous rocks and asks if they can head for the nearby harbor.
Theon agrees and then pretty blatantly takes the captain's daughter to his chambers for one last fling. She's pretty smitten, despite the fact that Theon's kind of an arrogant ass. Yep. He talks of the old ways of the Iron Men, when they would have a true rock wife, but also salt wives, basically females captured during raids who were brought back to be sex slaves. She's not opposed. She thinks her father might not love her quite so much, having given her virtue over to Theon.
Theon, though, is not interested. When the boat arrives at Lordsport, he ditches her. Theon is curious about the number of boats he sees. He doesn't see his wild and reckless Uncle Euron's ship, Silence, but it appears his father has called many of his banners. There's no welcoming party, despite numerous ravens having been sent to herald Theon's arrival. He tries to secure passage to the castle from an innkeep, but a priest of the drowned god says that he will take Theon up to Pike. The priest turns out to be Theon's youngest uncle, Aeron. Theon remembers him as a fun-loving party animal, but he's a changed man. He is devout and dour, and makes the ride home pretty grim.
Theon is rebaptized by his uncle, who the innkeep refers to as Damp Hair. Can I tell you that it was only on this reread that I realised that was Damp Hair? I called him Damfair the whole time.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, I could see that. Yeah. The fact that he's a priest of the drowned god, There were clues. There were clues. I mean, I was reading it to myself. It didn't matter I was getting it wrong, right.
But I did. As I thought about reading that word out for this, I was like, I really should get that right. I think I would look silly if I get that wrong.
That's one of the harder parts of our job is getting the names as right as we can. Because you said, we're reading them in our head, so exactly. It's not always how everyone else might pronounce it. Anyway, we were telling a story.
Yes, the innkeep refers to the uncle as Damp Hair. He then learns that his sister Asha is away in her longboat, Black Wind, raising more banners. Aeron, his uncle, gives a "we'll see" to Theon's claim to be the heir to the Iron Islands, and the two sulk for a while. Theon thinks of his time in Winterfell. He was never abused, but Ned, and particularly Cat, always treated him like an outsider. He reckons that Jon had more honour. Jon might not agree.
Yeah, me either. Theon arrives at the castle, still no fanfare. Poor kid. He's shown to chambers and washes and dresses to meet with his father. Balon is not impressed. Theon wears a neck chain, forgetting that Iron Men only wear jewelry taken in battle, the iron price, not bought with gold, the gold price. Balon rips it off and throws it into the fire, and Balon accuses Theon of bringing Robb's plans. Theon says they're his plans, designed to re-elevate the Iron Men to past glories. Balon is skeptical. Theon slightly enhances his relationship with Robb Stark, and this does not go down well with Balon either.
The plan is for Robb to head west from Riverrun to take the Golden Tooth. If you remember, the Golden Tooth was the sort of dividing point between the Westlands and the Riverlands. Yep. With Tywin miles east, only Sir Stafford Lannister's untrained ragtag army stands in the way. They'll muster and try to hold those passes, leaving the great port city of Lannisport and even Casterly Rock exposed. Theon would lead the Iron Men to glory, Balon gets his crown, Theon takes Casterly Rock for his seat, and Robb's very happy. But this whole offer of a crown sounds like the gold price to Balon. He'd rather pay the iron price. He sees other undefended targets that they could take. Theon realises what he's talking about.
Uh-oh.
The book doesn't say what he's talking about, but I assume that he's talking about the North.
Yes.
Because really the only two parts of the world that are sort of vulnerable right now are the West and the North, because the people there are in the field fighting.
Yeah, maybe he's going to go to the far north, like north of the Wall, and take...
North of the Wall, possibly.
That's undefended!
That's the iron price right there.
Yes. Yeah, this is another long chapter. According to my audiobook, it was exactly 60 minutes.
Really? This was longer than the last one?
I
think you said the last one was 53 last time.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, slightly longer, I guess.
We'll be right back.
Hello, friends. Are you ready to make some unforgettable memories? Well, if so, consider the Marriott Bonvoy program. Discover the perfect destination for your summer getaway and unlock exclusive deals on luxurious accommodations. With our affiliate partnership, you'll enjoy unbeatable savings and a seamless booking experience. Don't let summer slip away. Visit Marriott Bonvoy today and make this vacation season one for the books. Use our Ghosts of Harrenhal affiliate page to check it all out and buy Bonvoy points or give some as a gift. The link to our page is in the show notes.
Yeah, it's good though. I mean, it's always good to get new characters.
And Theon's definitely he's an interesting POV. We'll talk about that in a bit, but he's going to have a journey. Is our Theon? Yes. He's definitely not a bland character. He has very opinionated thoughts. He thinks very highly of himself, as you can tell from this chapter.
He's a different new POV character than Sir Davos was, because he's been in the book. Sir Davos was basically new to the book,
right?
And so was given POV.
Yeah.
But Theon's been in it and become a POV character, and I guess that's partly because he's always been with Robb and the Starks, and so there was no need for the Theon POV because it was picked up by everybody else.
Right.
You know.
Yes.
Now he's gone. He's a lone wolf. We need to keep track of him, so that's why he got the honor.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there was certainly enough POVs going on around him while he was with the Starks.
Exactly. I mean, Robb himself is not a POV character, but
which is an interesting decision.
He's almost always, he's almost always in the presence of someone who is Robb. He's either with his mother, although I guess right now, if his mother's going south, he isn't right now. We might lose track of Robb for a while.
It's true, unless we get maybe his POV will be next. Who knows?
Maybe. We shall see.
But Theon is... The chapter starts with Theon so confident that his plan will be accepted and that it will secure him a spot as a future king. While they're on the ship that's taking him to Lordsport on Pike, he reaches in and touches the letter, reaches into his... pocket and touches Robb's letter and thinks of it as a letter as good as a crown, and things just don't go so well for him.
Yeah, and it's funny because the plan is actually rock solid.
Absolutely.
But the plan does hinge on one thing, which is Balon Greyjoy forgiving the Starks.
Yes.
And so that's the thing. He has an axe to grind with the Starks more than he does with the Lannisters.
Yeah.
So there was a risk here for that reason.
Absolutely. It was definitely an oversight that Robb and Theon, probably in their youth and not realizing what the older generation's feelings towards each other were, probably caused them to have this oversight of how Balon will feel about Ned's son and the Starks and working with them.
Yeah, but I think the other thing that sort of runs through this chapter is this whole iron price against the gold price. Because, I mean, literally, he's being offered... I mean, let's be honest, Casterly Rock and Lannisport are much better targets in terms of wealth and prestige than anything you could take in the north.
Right.
I mean, the north
Absolutely.
is just, miserable, cold, But... So even though the offer is better than what Balon's come up with, he goes with the thing that he's come up with because that's the iron price. That's him coming up with it himself. It's not being gifted to him.
Yes.
It's not being presented to him.
Yeah.
He's fighting for
You're
it.
right. It's definitely a decision because, like you said, the plan is a solid plan. And if they put that plan into action, they'd have a high probability of success.
Oh, yeah.
But Theon is so confident on his way into Pike that when he sees the longships hosting out in the water, he is actually concerned that his father has anticipated why Theon is coming home and has made plans of his own to aid Robb. And he's afraid that it's going to steal Theon is afraid it's going to steal his own thunder. And he thinks to himself that this is the season this is the year, the day, and I am the man. And he's just so sure that he is on his way to becoming king. And yeah.
Yeah. I gotta say, I mean, obviously Theon doesn't know his father, you know.
Right.
He's been gone half of his 20 years, he's been gone. So he was 10 when he left. But he knows the stories of the Iron Men. He knows the stories of the Iron Island. And it must occur to him that he's going to get a cold reception no matter what. I mean, even if he came back with Robb Stark's head under his arm, he would still get a cold reception just because they're cold.
Yeah.
Inevitably they're cold.
Yeah, I kind of had the same thought about why he was so overly confident. Yeah, it definitely felt like he's been away from the Iron Islands for too long and was too young when he left to remember all the details of the Ironborn culture.
Yeah.
But it's not only the crown that he's got so much expectations for, just the general homecoming. He's anticipating a big homecoming. He's thinking there might be an honor guard, his parents there to greet him at the dock. He'll see old faces and family members.
There were a lot of boats. It did feel like maybe it was going to happen.
Yes.
But he literally meets a couple of servants and his father, and that's it.
And nobody, aside from his uncle and his father, have a clue who he is. He gets off the dock, and he's so irked that the fisherfolk in Lordsport are just staring at him with, as Martin refers to it, bovine, clueless eyes. And the one guy, he says, I need a horse. And he's like, okay, where do you want to go? And he's like, Pike! How do you not know this? Look at me. Do you not know who I am? Yeah, it goes quite the opposite. His mom and sister are both away. His mom is on a different island because I guess it's less harsh where on Harlaw. And his sister's away raising more banners. And his father couldn't be roused to greet him. His uncle, who he thought was going to be fun from his memories, turns out to be really dour and depressing and very much treats him like a stranger. So.
Yeah. And so, I mean, just to jump ahead a little bit, so he rebaptizes Theon into the religion of the drowned god, and basically pours water on him, and the words are, "What is dead can never die."
Yeah.
Right. So it's a pretty grim religion to add to all the grim surroundings
Yes.
and the grim people.
Yeah.
And Theon's description of it, I mean, it is a rough existence because these are rocky islands with very little crops, and that's part of their words are, "We do not sow."
Yes.
But
right.
They've been tamed by their failed rebellion, and now they fish and sow. That is what they do. They're just like everybody else. They don't go raiding anymore. And so existence is really harsh for these guys. Now, it used to be harsh, but punctuated by plunder and fighting.
Right.
Now it's just unremitting drudgery.
Yeah, he paints a pretty bleak picture to the captain's daughter. He says that life on the Iron Islands is stern, stony, scant of comforts, bleak of prospects, and death is never far.
Right.
So,
right.
Not exactly painting a utopian society.
I think at another point he calls it mean and meager.
Yeah.
Which is another... So, lots of negative adjectives.
Yeah, and he basically describes 3 different primary jobs on the island. There's There's fishermen, farmers, and miners. And that he says that what they do for fun is they argue over who has the worst lot in life. And he thinks it's the miners that have the worst lot. So, yeah, it's...
Well, that's partly perhaps because, cause and effect, they sent the slaves down the mines, so they didn't care whether they came back or not particularly.
Yes,
so,
that's true.
But they sent them down because it was the worst job.
His homecoming reminded me of, I guess it was about a couple of years ago. When I was in college, I worked at the student union. I worked maintenance and setup crew at the student union. And I was there for all 4 years of my time in college. I knew all of the adults, like the actual staff, and I had a ton of connections and friends and knew every inch of that place. And then I graduated and didn't come back for about 2 decades. And about a year and a half, 2 years ago, I came back, and I was so excited to see the place because in my mind, everybody was still there, looking exactly like they did when I left and doing the exact same jobs that they had when I left. And I came back, and the whole place, first of all, had been completely renovated. Didn't look anything like it did when I was there. And I went up to the front desk, and I was asking, like, "Hey, is Kathy here?" And the girl working behind the counter looked at me with clueless bovine eyes, and I was like, "How about Dawn, Chuck, Sam, Carl?" And she was like, "Are you just making up names?"
Yeah, yeah. Let's see if I can find somebody.
Like, does anybody else work here? So yeah, I get expectation versus reality after a long homecoming.
Well, not to one up your story or try to one up your story, but I've told you about my first visit home after I left home to go to university. My first visit home.
I'm not sure if you have actually.
They'd sold my bed.
Oh, yes, I knew that.
That was a welcoming return.
Oh, you came back.
Yeah.
Were you planning on sleeping?
Well, here, I'll do the laundry and then maybe you can sleep on it.
Oh, man. Anyway.
So we pretty quickly get to hear the real Theon. I mean, basically, we've never known. I mean, the adults in his life seemed suspicious of him. They didn't think he was totally trustworthy. But he was friends with Robb, no doubt about that.
Right.
He was friends with Robb. So is he here purely for the Stark cause? Well, yeah, he's here for the Stark cause, but his inner monologue is he is not loyal to the Starks. He's excited to see the kraken flying over the castle.
Without the Stark shadow over it. Yeah, and a few times he has thoughts like, no Stark anywhere around him.
Yeah, and he says that his life is his own again. You know, that's and of course, I mean that's true to an extent. You might feel that just because you've escaped your captivity,
sure,
however benign that captivity was.
Yeah.
But yes, he's a mixture of things for sure. Theon's character, he is contemptuous and malicious in his treatment of both the captain and the captain's daughter.
Yes.
He's very much a sort of princeling in that he expects people to kowtow to him.
Yes.
But
which is tough when nobody knows who he is.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. With the hubris that we saw in this chapter, it makes sense that he'd resent being subservient to the Starks.
Yeah.
Because he certainly likes people being subservient to him.
Right. And that's a good point. I mean, if this is his natural state of being, then he's contorted himself for 10 years to not be like this. Right. Or at least to not be like this within eyeshot of his captors.
Right. Yeah.
So the land of the Iron Men was greatly reduced by Aegon the Conqueror. They used to rule the Riverlands, but now they only have the Iron Islands, which, as we said, are pretty bleak. They long to return to the old ways because that would get them back to more than just a subsistence kind of living. And Theon reckons that his father rebelled not for the crown, but for a return to those old ways.
Yeah, and he even thinks this is, again, him being so sure early on. He thinks that he has succeeded where his father Balon had failed as far as expanding beyond just the islands, which is just another disappointment for Theon in this chapter.
Yeah. By the way, have you seen any of the America's Cup? It's just been going on.
Oh, I have not. I did not know it was going on.
I'm not a big sailing buff, but watching the America's Cup is really fascinating because those things look like spaceships. They're absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
The technology that they have. They can. The thing that blew my mind was how fast they can go because it's a sailing ship. The only way that ship moves is the wind blowing it.
Right.
Okay. So I thought that ship's velocity was strictly capped at the speed of the wind.
Yes, I could see that. That would make...
It can go as much as 2.5 times the speed of the wind.
How? Do you know?
I did a little bit of research, but it's hard to explain. But basically, the idea is this. If you're running forward, you feel the wind on your face, right?
Yeah.
Well, it uses that. It uses the force that's being pressed against it to help it go even faster.
Huh.
But the other thing is, the whole boat levitates. It comes out of the water. The hull of the ship doesn't even touch the water. It's just got one sort of like fin that sits down in the water. And it just flies above the water. It's an amazing sight.
Wow. So most of the ship is actually not in the water.
Exactly. Just a tiny, tiny piece of it is in the water. At least when it gets going, anyway. If the wind stops, it comes to a halt and falls back down into the water.
Yeah, I bet it does.
Because 2.5 times 0 is still 0.
Still 0, yeah.
So anyway, the whole sailing aspect of this particular episode got me thinking about that.
Yeah.
So Theon talks about his 2 older brothers who were killed in his father's uprising. Roderick was killed storming Seaguard by Jason Mallister, who's still Lord of Seaguard. Maron, the younger of his 2 older brothers, was crushed to death when the South Tower collapsed during Robert's foray into Pike. Theon remembers neither of them very fondly. He remembers drunken cuffs from the elder and cruel japes and lies from the younger. So probably happy that they're not still there. Although, had they survived, they might have been the ones dragged off to Winterfell instead of him.
Good point. Very much. Likely.
Although, actually, I bet if there'd been more than one son, they would have dragged them all off to different places.
Yeah, that's possible. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he doesn't seem too broken up about their loss. In fact, he makes a joke to Patrick Mallister about Jason Mallister's animosity toward the Greyjoys, and he's like, if he thinks that I hold a grudge against him for killing my brother Roderick, it's only because he never met my brother Roderick. Oh boy. So yeah, leaving those 2 dying left him as the last male heir. So
which of course made him the heir apparent. So
yes,
another reason to be grateful to those who killed his brothers.
Right.
And frankly, growing up in Winterfell would be more fun than growing up in Pike. So
it sure seems
it's a
neither
win-win-win.
seem like a cushy life like you might have at Highgarden or something, but definitely of the 2, Winterfell seems like the more nurturing location to be raised in.
Yeah, I mean, it's Ned Stark. It's not going to be a loving foster father, but Balon feels like an actively horrible father to have. So
yes, absolutely.
So Theon got to ride with the Mallisters because his journey to Pike went via Seaguard. So he went back to Seaguard with the Mallisters from Riverrun. And as Mackelly mentioned, he became friends with Patrick Mallister. But interestingly, Jason Mallister tried to end that friendship. He, like you said, he did not trust the Greyjoys enough to see his own son befriending one of them.
Yeah.
So it felt like Patrick was a sort of similar person to Theon. Liked the ladies and gambling and
hawking,
drinking.
I think they said.
Hawking, yes.
Yeah, so he reminds him by mentioning that Seaguard was built to defend against the Ironborn Reavers. But, I thought maybe that Jason could have looked at it from a different light, that he could possibly see a positive in their friendship, the heir of Seaguard and the future Lord of the Iron Islands having a friendly relationship could be a good thing for that area of the of Westeros for future peace.
But maybe the thinking is never trust them.
Yes, right. I'm sure that's what he was thinking. But
that friendship could be used against you.
Yes, you put your guard
Lower
down.
Your guard.
And
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. There's a couple of quick things I noticed. I don't know how much discussion worthy they are, but things I noticed that I wanted to quickly bring up was that he mentions his uncle Euron's ship Silence was not at Lord's Port with the other longships. And we'll find out later in the story why that ship is called Silence. And it explains the thought that Theon had that his uncle Euron is a different song from his father and his other uncles. So just...
Oh, I'm glad you explained that, because when you said his Uncle Euron's ship Silence, I thought you were telling me to be quiet.
Silence!
His Uncle Euron's Silence!
Another thing I noticed was that he said that the captain was bending over backward to accommodate and be courteous to him because of the promise of a purse of gold coins for this voyage. But then when Theon left the ship, he pressed one gold dragon into the captain's hand and said, "Have the men bring up my stuff." And there's no other mention of any sort of payment at the end of the trip, because then he just got off the ship and went with his uncle. And I wondered if that ended up being the total payment, just one gold dragon, when he was expecting a purse of gold dragons, or if that was just a tip for having the men bring my stuff out.
I'm going to guess the second. If I had someone like Theon on my ship, I would want payment in advance, because
I agree, but the wording was the promise of a purse of gold coins. So
perhaps pedantry.
Oh, perhaps. He's not going to let him off the ship without pay. We're turning this thing right around, man.
Yeah. Oh, I'm going to send your stuff right to the market.
We'll be right back.
This episode is sponsored by Audible. To get a free audiobook, or 2 if you're an Amazon Prime member, go to our exclusive URL, audibletrial.com/ghostsharrenhal. You can find the link in our show notes. Then the third thing was that, so Aeron, his youngest uncle, who meets him at Lordsport, he had a near drowning incident where his ship went down in the storm. It was similar to another character we met in the prologue and quickly in the last chapter, was Patchface. Both went down on a ship in a storm, and both were transformed when they miraculously survived. Now, Aeron does still seem to have his sanity, which Patchface not so much.
No.
But, yeah, it turned...
He definitely lost his fun-loving nature.
Yes, right, yes. Yeah. No creepy rhymes, though, so
yeah,
there's that.
So Theon's been away for 10 years, and is 10 years a bit excessive to hold a child for this, for the crime? And then that sort of like begs the question, is there ever an end point to these wardships? I mean, do you let them go, or do you just... Basically, was he going to be a prisoner of Winterfell, but for recent events, until Balon died? And then he would be released to go back and be Lord of the Iron Islands.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the situation. We know that Robb's terms to Cersei had a 10-year plan, right? I think it was, give me...
That's right, they did, yeah.
It was a 5-year plan. Give me 10...
5-year plan, 2 a year.
2 a year, yeah. But this definitely felt a bit excessive. I mean, I don't know. I guess maybe he just didn't trust Balon. You know, obviously he's got a good reason not to, but I was wondering if maybe he was considering releasing Theon soon, but then this whole, having to go to King's Landing to be Hand of the King, and he didn't trust Balon to behave while he was away, and so that whole thing got scrapped. But
and then he got his head cut off.
Yeah.
Since that time, he's not given a thought to Theon. Really.
He has not. He's lost his head, basically. But he also probably figured that he could raise Theon and Robb to become close. Like he was successful at that, or so we thought. Maybe he hoped to create some sort of foster brother situation like he and Robert had in the Eyrie. But that's a little tougher to do when one of the kids is technically a hostage. Right.
And the other one is a trueborn son.
Right.
Ned and Robert were both foster children.
Significant difference there, yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, to me it felt like, as I thought about it when he said, I've been away 10 years, I thought, that is a long time to hold a hostage. I mean, it didn't seem like there was any end in sight. So.
Yeah. But I mean, think about the relative crime. I mean, what Robb Stark is trying to achieve in the Riverlands now is peace and established borders. And that 5 years feels like a good period to do that. What this was flat out rebellion against the crown.
Yeah.
And you're taking away his son permanently until such time as you trust him again, which will never be. And so basically your son will be raised by us until you're dead, and then he can become the Lord of the Iron Islands, and hopefully he'll be better than you. And that's why we're doing this.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I can see that. Now, of course, he's forgetting how unique the Ironborn are as well, and that they don't behave like
Rob.
No, Ned is forgetting that they might not choose to follow him because he's not been raised in the Ironborn way. So, yeah, that
indeed, sending him back in fancy dress to take over in the light of Balon's death might backfire pretty spectacularly.
Yes, exactly.
They'll appoint whoever they want, and that person will be like, we are not following this guy.
Yeah.
He is a soft child of summer.
Exactly. But so we get his thoughts on the Starks. He while he's riding with Aeron, and Aeron makes some snide remarks about him being a Stark and stuff, and he says that's not true, but then they ride in silence because they're not getting along very well. He starts ruminating about the Starks, and he says that he knows the whole castle knew that he was a hostage and treated him accordingly. I don't know about that. We didn't get a ton of Theon-based content, while they were at Winterfell, but he seemed to have pretty significant amount of freedom to leave and go as he pleased. I mean, we know the chapter when Bran and Robb and Theon and Maester Luwin, they all rode out and they met Osha and that situation out in the woods there. He was telling Robb of the women he'd slept with, which appeared to be in the winter town outside of the castle. So, I don't know. It just seems like he had more freedom than him being considered a hostage.
Yeah, and he was educated by the Starks. He was trained by the Starks. They clearly furnished him with money because, from what we learned in this chapter, Balon was not sending a stipend.
Exactly. Right. He called him Ned Stark's daughter because of the way he was dressed in such fancy clothes. So, clearly he wasn't saying, hey, here's some money to help raise my son. So, they were spending their own money on him, and he was dressed very nicely. And, he came with Ned to the beheading, and he was trusted during that beheading of poor Garrett. He was trusted to be the one accountable for Ice's whereabouts, the sword. And, he was allowed to become very close friends with Robb. So it felt like the only missing piece is parental love and affection. And based on what we've seen so far, it looks like he got better in Winterfell than he would have gotten in Pyke anyway. So,
yeah, I mean, he got just about as much as the Stark children, to be honest.
Right. Yeah. More, I mean, we don't know exactly, but it didn't seem like his life was too bad. Now he thinks that Jon was given more honor than him. But if you remember way back in Jon 1, the dinner for the royal family arriving in Winterfell, Theon got to come in during the procession and got to sit at it's assumed he sat at the high table since he came in with the procession, whereas Jon had to sit down with the unwashed masses. So, and Theon was allowed in the courtyard with the princes, the Baratheon boys, while Jon had to make himself scarce. That was an Arya one. So,
not sure we should call them the Baratheon boys anymore.
Right. At the time they were Baratheon boys.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Jon was definitely treated with less respect than Theon. And Kat was no fan of either of them, but I think she'd choose Theon in a heartbeat over Jon. Although, actually, the strange thing about that is I think she trusts Jon more than she trusts Theon.
Yeah.
She just has this blind hatred of Jon.
I see what you're saying. And we had talked about before, during some of the Kat-Jon interactions, that maybe part of the reason that she was so hard on him was because she saw what a good, honest kid he was, and that irked her, that he wasn't more of a little turd. And, I think she might have appreciated it more if he was more of a jerk. But he was such a good, honest kid, that probably irked her. But then he says the Cat is distant and suspicious, and we've pondered about Cat and Theon's relationship. I think we just did back in one of the more recent Cap chapters. And we we learned finally in this last Cat 1 of A Clash of Kings here that we just had a few chapters ago that she mistrusted his constant smirk. So, but in a Game of Thrones early Cat chapters, she trusted him with that big secret at the time. Turns out she was telling everybody the secret, but at the time it was a big secret of the dagger and the theory of the Lannisters' involvement in pushing Bran. So, and if you recall, he said to her at that scene that Ned was like a second father to him and that his house owes the Starks for taking him as a ward. So based on what we get now, it definitely feels like that was lip service just to be able to hear the secret.
Yeah. I do remember that when Cat arrived at Moat Cailin, he was the first to come to her and drop to his knees and kiss her hand. So that was clearly a sign that I kind of know the type. One who can sort of curry favour by doing the polite things, doing them well, but they have like a hard heart underneath it.
I think what we'd call here being an Eddie Haskell. Does that register in?
Not even slightly.
Eddie Haskell was a character on Leave It to Beaver who was a bit of a troublemaker, but really good at talking to the parents like he was such a great, sweet kid.
Yeah, that sounds about right. So Theon's reunion with his father is a complete debacle. He's dressed too fancy, he gets called Ned's daughter. He wanted to impress. I mean, he dressed to impress him, show that he was successful and grown up. It was a miscalculation.
Yes, it was. It just further showed that he's no longer Ironborn and has forgotten the Ironborn ways and customs. And we had that, like, I think it was you that mentioned in the summary about the necklace. And, and then Balon says that the Greenlands, that it was as he feared, the Greenlands made him soft and the Starks made you theirs.
Yeah. Rob and Theon didn't think it through. They didn't think through the optic of this, which it's interesting though. It's how do you do this though? Because obviously Rob couldn't come.
Right.
But then do you send someone like the great John Umber or something like that to sort of like be more martial and intimidating? Say, you're going to do this.
It's not easy because there's no obvious choice. But like Kat said, anyone would be better than sending Theon. That was her pitch to him. Send anyone. But I think someone like Brendan Blackfish Tully might be a good option.
Yeah. Because Blackfish Tully is better than Umber because he's a little bit more diplomatic.
Right.
But Umber could strike fear into him. The one thing that does make Theon the worst choice is nobody else would be turned to the dark side here.
Yes.
Theon is the one who can be.
Right.
And I think to a certain extent he already was. He didn't have to be turned. He was already thinking, hey, I'm going home.
I'm going home and I'm going to get a crown. Yeah. Yeah, that's tough. I mean, Jason Mallister might have been an option, but he is a Mallister, and the Mallisters and the Greyjoys, there's some bad blood there. So that probably wouldn't have been a good option since he literally did kill one of Balon's sons. So I think it was Roger.
Yeah. But then again, maybe that's the message you want to send, We've killed one of your sons. We have one of your sons still.
Yes.
You join us, you can have him back.
Sure. Yeah, that would be one way you could go about it. I mean, it's not the most... it's not going to curry the most favor, but it certainly could be the most effective. Right. Although I do, in a bit, I will question whether that logic would actually be true. But, so, Balon's offended by the wording of the letter. The letter says, help me and I will give you a crown. And of course we understand his meaning. He means, help me and we'll both get crowns together. But the wording is, help me and I will give you a crown. And the Ironborn is somewhat in an opposite way of the Dothraki's gift for a gift system. The Ironborn system is more of a take. Don't buy a gift, you take what you want. So that was very poor wording, and anyone who knew the Ironborn should, and anyone knew how Balon Greyjoy felt about the old ways, would have advised using a different wording.
Yeah. And I think the most horrible misstep in the whole thing is, while Theon is sort of like listing this catalogue of things that's annoying Balon, he then says, and we'll take Casterly Rock for me Theon. And
dude, timing, man. It's all about timing.
Do you see that look on his face and how it's getting worse and worse? Now is not the time to say you're going to take the richest city in Westeros for yourself.
Oh my goodness. I was like, well, did you really just bring... Maybe it's just a parent thing. Maybe only parents can see. Like, no, don't bring up rewards right now. You're already on thin ice, kid. But we got news. We got some news in this chapter. Robb is headed for the Golden Tooth. Now, back in Cat 1 of A Clash of Kings, Robb was still stuck in River Run trying to decide what the best plan of action was. So it sounds like Theon is breaking some news here that they are going to head toward the Golden Tooth and try and squash that new Lannister army before it can become fully formed.
Yeah. But the plan is rock solid if they could get Balon to agree to it. I mean, if Robb attacks from the east over the passes, then the only people who can defend the west are Sir Stafford Lannister's ragtag army. They will have to come out into the field, leaving the big cities vulnerable from the sea.
Absolutely.
So it is a really solid plan.
We also learned from Salador Sand last chapter that Renly's marching up the Rose Road. And Tywin can no longer, if those two things are happening, Tywin can no longer sit in Harrenhal and just bide his time. He's going to have to come out and go one of the two directions, either toward the west or towards King's Landing. And as King's Landing is completely undefended aside from the City Watch, you would think he would march toward King's Landing.
Yeah. But I'll throw one thing to you. It is hard to go over mountain passes with an army. You need a significant excess force to win that battle at the Golden Tooth. If Robb were to get bogged down there and Tywin did come up behind him, he could be crushed between the hammer and the anvil.
You're right.
So there is a risk there. And particularly if Tywin were to find out about Balon's planned treachery, that means that Sir Stafford could really leave the cities completely undefended, bring everyone, and just try and hold them in the passes.
Yeah, there's no fear of a sea attack if he knows Balon is going to head toward Winterfell. But if you're right, that would be like the worst situation for Robb if what you just laid out happened. If Tywin...
that would take a lot of coordination that we don't think is happening. I don't think Balon and Tywin are close friends or anything like that.
Right. Yeah, you doubt it. But if Tywin did head towards King's Landing, if Stannis could put his grievances aside with his brother, Renly, and sail on King's Landing, we could have two sea and land duos heading toward the Lannister strongholds at this point.
Right, yeah. I see what you mean, yes.
Plus, Roose Bolton's force is still out there somewhere, theoretically, in the Riverlands to aid something, to do something.
Yeah. So we are only guessing what Balon means, but it does feel like the only other undefended targets are the north. He compares it to a plum, ripe and undefended. The undefended, yes. I'm not sure how ripe Winterfell is. It's pretty empty and desolate is how I would think of it now. But
yeah, we've definitely talked about as more and more people kept leaving Winterfell. We did mention how woefully undefended it's become. I mean, there's no real lord. There's a little boy.
7-year-old, paralyzed 7-year-old.
Yes, and no real force to secure it. So, yeah. It would be...
this could go badly.
It could indeed. Now, the good news is that Winterfell sits smack dab in the middle of the north. So you'd think they should have some warning if...
Right.
They'd
it's
have
not coastal.
Yes. They can't attack it overnight.
They can't bring their long ships up to the wall. Yes.
Right, yeah. You know, one thing that I felt like was very apparent in this chapter is that Balon was going out of his way to make Theon feel unwelcomed and uncomfortable. Both Balon and Aeron were throwing insults at him and insinuations at him. And, Aeron made it known that he wasn't trusting Theon enough to tell him about what the longships were doing. And he also made the insinuation that we'll see whether or not you're the heir because your sister also lives. And he says to Theon at one point, "You're a fool if you think your father is going to turn these holy lands over to a Stark." Mm-hmm. And I wondered if the whole thing from both of these two men might have been trying to force Theon to show if he's still a Greyjoy or a Stark. Push him in one way or the other.
Does he respond by defending the Starks, or does he say, "No, I'm with you"?
Yes. Did they force him to say, watch how much of a Greyjoy I am. I will show you. Or is he like, you know what? I don't need this. I'm going back to the Starks.
Yep. I do wonder if maybe they just sent this message by Raven, what Balon's reaction would be. So Theon's still with Robb. Balon feels like Balon no longer cares about Theon at all. Feels like he sort of abandoned him as a son.
Yes.
So if he doesn't care about him, does he go, "All right, I'm going to Winterfell"?
Yes.
I know it's undefended. Or does he toe the line because he still has hopes that Theon will be brought back to him?
Yep. That's exactly what I was getting at when I said later I want to debate about whether or not he would actually keep his word because they still have his son, or if he will be like, having seen their interaction here, I just wonder if he would even fear for Theon's safety. Would it make a difference if Robb had Theon? Would it make a difference if Balon decided he wanted to attack the north? I really don't know that it would at this point. He's got an heir in Asha. At least that's the way Aeron is hinting at it.
Yeah, but maybe if you phrase it right, maybe if you say, "Look, if you do this for us, A, you will be the king of the Iron Islands. You'll be reinstated to what you wanted to be, and B, we'll send Theon home for you so that you can live out the rest of your life re-educating your son to be truly Ironborn again."
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That might do it.
That might have been a very good way to phrase it.
Mm-hmm.
We've
had a lot of time to think about it.
Yes, that's true.
It's not like our lives depend on it, though, and their lives do, so I would have got this right. Yeah. So, one thing I was wondering about with the whole sort of new POV characters, I wonder about George Martin's writing process, I wonder if he sketches out the entire story and then thinks about who his narrators should be.
Yeah, right.
Because, I mean,
I could see
that feels like it would be an enormous amount of work, but at the same time, if you choose your POV characters, then you're forced to keep them at the forefront of the story. Uh-huh. Whereas if you know the story, then you can choose the POV characters who have the most interesting journeys.
Right. Yeah, definitely. That would definitely make some sense. Yeah. I wonder if maybe he had more POV characters and then had to whittle down. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
But I don't know. I wonder, I'm sure someone's asked him something like this before. I don't know if he's...
I refuse to read other people's interviews with George Martin. I'm saving these questions up for the man himself when he comes on our show. Anyway, I just wondered about that.
Yeah, it's a very good question. I like that.
But the whole thing is pretty rough on Theon. He seems to be unloved everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious how that will inform his relationship with his father and the Iron Men. He's not going to get much love from them either. But given that he'll see that as no worse than what he receives anywhere else, he might be still willing to side with them, even though they're treating him roughly.
Right.
It's not like he can run off to the bosom of his other family, because they're not that bosomy.
Right, yeah. There's a bigger upside staying with Balon, because he could stand to have a bigger position than he might if he bails on them and goes back to Robb. Although, if there's a new landscape, Robb might end up making him lord of somewhere else.
Hand of the king.
Right, exactly. Hand of the king. Yeah. So,
yeah, I've got to say, if I was Theon and this was the reaction, I'd probably be on that boat back out of here. Don't bother unpacking. I don't like it here.
Yeah, it's definitely this conversation with Balon is definitely feels like it's going to force a test of allegiance, blood versus water. The water that raised him, being Ned, and trusted him to do his duty honestly and honorably, being Robb, and the blood that has made, to our knowledge, no negotiations to try and get him back, and has demeaned him since he set foot on the island. So, I know, I guess we'll just have to see.
Yeah. You got some background for us?
Yeah, we're running a bit long, so I'm just going to do a quick one here. So, the tower that Theon is taken to, where his chambers are, is called the Bloody Tower. And it's called the Bloody Tower because Riverlord's children were murdered in the same chambers that Theon is in. So, again, that feels a little bit to me like they're sending a message to Theon that he's an outsider. But anyway, I thought you might be interested in hearing about the situation that caused the name for this tower. So Bernard II Justman was a king of the Trident. He, in fact, was the last king of the Trident from House Justman. And his 3 sons were taken hostage after the Riverlords were defeated by Cored Hor, who was king of the Iron Islands at the time. And 3 years later, Cored murdered Bernard's sons while they were held hostage in Pyke, as we learned from Theon. But it was because Bernard was slow to pay a tribute. So Cored's Ironborn crushed Bernard's hopeless war for revenge, and Bernard was drowned as a sacrifice to the drowned god. And the fall of the Justmans led the Riverlands into a century of anarchy.
Huh. Interesting.
So that's the background on why that tower got its name.
Comparison with the television show, this is all very similar. The view of Pike, the captain's daughter, the lack of a reception when he gets to Lordsport. He's not met by his uncle, but a young woman offers to ride him up to Pike. They share a horse. Being Theon, he cops a feel. And it turns out that this is his sister, who in the TV show, which is unfortunate, and will make family dinners more awkward going forward. But they renamed her for the TV show. She's not Asha in the TV show. She was named Yara. So, and I read that it was because Asha was similar to Osha, who is the wildling in Winterfell.
I wondered why they renamed her. That makes sense.
That's what I read. I don't know if it's true.
That makes sense.
So we never meet Damphair or Damphair. Balon's reaction is pretty much identical, but it's not just the two of them. Yara Asha is there watching and laughing at her younger brother.
Great. So there's an audience.
Yeah. Exactly, for his dressing down. Yeah.
Oh, even
so
better.
It's possibly even worse for Theon. I've just watched a show with that same actress in it, actually.
I did yesterday.
Killing Eve?
No, we're watching The Crown, and she plays like the secretary of a lord, and I think she's only in that one episode. Have you watched The Crown?
Making it up. I've watched The Crown. I don't remember her in it.
Season 2. The newspaper guy who writes the negative stuff about Queen Elizabeth and then ends up changing how the monarchy interacts with the commoners.
Interesting.
His kind of secretary and then what appears to be love interest as the episode goes on is none other than Yara / Asha Greyjoy. I'm pretty sure anyway.
If we're lying, we're lying.
Yeah, that's right.
Pedantry Corner. Pike doesn't have an anchorage. It seems strange to have the capital of a seagoing people not have an anchorage. Now, I get that they wanted it on this like promontory that was like, rugged and scary looking, but and hard to get to. But it's hard to get to. You're not always being assailed. There are times when you're gonna want it to be easy to get to because you're trying to get to it.
Yes, I think I know the reason why.
Go on, then.
It's because before Aegon's conquest, the Greyjoys weren't the kings of the Iron Islands. the Grey Irons and another one I think called the Good Brothers or something like that were previous kings of the Iron Islands. And then after the conquering, Aegon said, okay, you guys can pick a lord for yourselves. And they picked Greyjoy. And so Pike wasn't originally the seat of power. It was Orkmont.
Okay, but it's still a seat of power.
Yes.
You just find a way to allow ships to dock there, is what I'm saying.
I see what you're saying.
It's not the history of this place I'm arguing about. It's the fact that it doesn't have a port. Yeah. And then the other one, we've kind of commented on this previously, actually. Theon thinks at one point it was to bring back the old way more than the empty vanity of a crown that Balon staged his great rebellion. Really? Really? You're giving him a big old pass there.
Yeah.
You're assigning very, very noble reasons to his grab for power.
Well, it had nothing to do with vanity and the desire to put a crown on his head. He just wanted to go reaving again. He missed it.
News and notes.
So, news and notes. So, HBO has 3 new Game of Thrones spin-offs in development. Aside from, we already know about the House of the Dragon. That one's already in production. They're working on that. Hopefully be out next year. But there's 3 that are in development. One is called 9 Voyages, or also being referred to as the Sea Snake. And it follows the adventurer Corlys Velaryon on his seafaring voyages. Now, we just mentioned House Velaryon last chapter because we were with Davos. It's the only spin-off with a creative team attached, and it's being developed by Bruno Heller, who created HBO's Rome and a few other popular shows like The Mentalist. And then there's also an idea for a show being called Flea Bottom, which takes place in that poor, dangerous part of King's Landing. We saw how dangerous it was when Arya was stuck there before finally escaping King's Landing. And a show being called 10,000 Ships. It appears to be focused on Princess Nymeria and her people's journey from the Rhoyne to Dorne. And I don't, there's not much beyond just ideas being tossed around as far as I can tell. But these latter 2 don't have any, there's no reports of any writers attached to it or them or anything. Okay.
Well, exciting nevertheless. How's the Discord server going?
We're having fun. I'm having a lot of fun. Good. Yeah. We're having a good time on there, especially, the Hodor channel is really hopping with a very in-depth conversation of Hodor and Hodor and Hodor. But no, really, it's been really cool to, you and I have been on there interacting with listeners, and listeners have been interacting with each other, and I've been throwing out some trivia questions in the trivia channel, and other listeners have been throwing out questions, and it's been really cool. A listener named Jenny just today posted a picture of a mural she'd done on a 3 foot by 3 foot, I think she said, mural of Westeros that she did on her wall, which is quite amazing. The amount of detail she put in is pretty fantastic. So, yeah, if you're interested in joining the conversations and the discussions,
where can I see that?
You could see it on the Discord server link, or on the Discord server.
I'm on the Discord server. Where?
Oh, it's on. She put it under trivia because we were discussing stuff in the trivia. But if you're interested in joining the conversation, the link to our server will be in this show notes.
That's really good what she's done.
Yeah,
it's talent.
Quite talented.
Someone on the Discord server has some talent. Anyway, do we have a review that we could read out?
We do. I went way back. This is one of our earliest reviews. I thought, I should reward those who left us reviews early on, not just pick newer ones. So this is one of our earliest, and it's from Apple Podcasts from a reviewer named Bob Bill Bob, and its subject line is "Great New Podcast." Being that we're on. What, this is like episode 85 or something?
Something like that.
Tell it's a little older. But anyway, it goes like this.
Hey, it's new to people,
That's
We're
right.
getting new people all the time.
That's right. I heard about this podcast and listened to the first episode.
He hadn't had time to get bored of us.
Yeah. The 2 hosts, Simon and Mackelly, are a great mix of American and British voices. Or at least we're a mix of American and British voices. Both are intelligent, articulate, and very funny.
All right.
All right. Well,
Stop undermining the commentary.
Sorry. They are long-term friends, and it shows in the relaxed and casual atmosphere they create. If you are a Game of Thrones fanatic and want to learn about the backstory and little-known facts about the TV series, plots, and characters, this show will be captivating and make you into a true Game of Thrones expert who can dazzle other fans with your treasure trove of knowledge. I have subscribed, and you should too.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Bill Bob. That was very kind of you. I hope you're still listening.
Yes, thank you. That was very nice.
Right.
I'm not quite sure that I fit all those descriptions, but
I think between us, we cover them.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So let's conclude before midnight. So Kat, I think, was right about Theon. He is unpleasant and self-serving.
Yeah.
As she always suspected.
Right.
And the question is, how is he going to react? I mean, it feels like he understood what Balon had in mind, but we never got his reaction to it. It was just sort of like a dawning realization, but not like a, I'm smiling along with you, or a, I should probably send a raven back to my friends.
Yes, yeah. The chapter ends with him saying, thinking in his head, I'd ask the question, where is he talking about storming or trying to take, but he already knows the answer. Yeah. So to me, it absolutely screams Winterfell. Right.
But what I mean is, given that, what is Theon's reaction to that?
Yes, that's what's going to... It's certainly going to test his true loyalties. We'll find out if these 10 years being raised fairly well with the Starks will mean more than his first 10 years being raised with his father and two brothers who like to smack him around and make fun of him.
Yeah. He does seem a bit hyper-focused on getting a crown of his own. What would that mean if his sister Asha turns out to be the clear favourite to be named as the heir?
Yeah. She's 3 years older, so she's spent the past 23 years on the Iron Islands. Yeah. And, one thing we didn't mention is that Balon says, my daughter took an axe for a lover.
Right.
I'm not going to let you dress like a prostitute. I'm not going to have you dressing like a prostitute or something. We don't he didn't expound on what that means, but it sounds like she's more of a warrior than he would appreciate.
That's what he meant. Yes.
Yeah. So, maybe she would be a better fit than Theon, who's been gone for the last decade. But then I was wondering if, has Robb's recent crown spurred some jealousy in Theon and created an urgency and a desire for his own crown? Like this boy that he considers like a younger brother to him is now King Robb. And, maybe he's like,
all the more reason not to send him.
Yeah, I need to be a king now too.
Yeah. And if Balon does carry out this plan and attacks the north, can Roderick, Bran, Maester Luwin,
Hodor,
Shaggy Dog, Hodor hold out?
Yeah, that is the question. I mean, with Shaggy Dog, you got a chance. So.
Yeah, Shaggy Dog's going to take a few down with him for sure. Yeah. Right. As always, you can reach us at ghost.harrenhall@gmail.com and follow us on Twitter at @GhostHarrenhall. We're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Discord.
That's right. And if you wouldn't mind going out and leaving us a 5-star rate or a fantastic review, we certainly would appreciate that. And hey, we might read it here in a future episode.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.